Chair of the King's Barton Forum, I'd like to welcome you all to the meeting this evening. As I think you are aware, but others listening might not be, it's being held virtually and in accordance with the Council's rules for virtual meetings. Councillors are reminded that although this meeting is being held remotely, we are present in a meeting of the Council and should observe the rules of normal behaviour at such a meeting. First of all, can I ask everyone present in this meeting that your microphones remain muted and your camera turned off while you're not addressing the meeting. This will reduce background noise and avoid any unintentional disturbances. Can members ensure that their mobile phones are now switched off or on silent? Please can I also advise that the open parts of the meeting are being audio recorded and live streamed from the Council's website, and in addition a video recording of the meeting will be uploaded to the Council's YouTube channel after the meeting. Members and officers, where appropriate for each item, please use the chat function of the meeting to indicate that you wish to speak or to raise a point of order or explanation. And I'll invite you to speak then at the appropriate time. Each member will be invited to speak in turn, and I would encourage all members to keep their contributions as clear and concise as possible, please. If any members wish to leave the meeting at any point, please could they make this known to me through the chat function, and I'll announce to the meeting that you're going to leave. Okay, can I ask Democratic Services Officer to undertake a roll call of members of the committee to confirm who is present this evening? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Well, obviously, Councillor Weir, you're present and chairing the meeting. Thank you. If I read out the list of names of the councillors, and if I could just ask you to turn on your camera and just confirm you're here, that'd be brilliant. Thank you. Councillor Cremoisen.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Cunningham.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Godfrey. I haven't seen Councillor Godfrey yet on the list of participants, so I'll come back to him. Councillor Horrell.
Yes, good evening, I'm here.
Thank you. Councillor Lerney.
Good evening, I'm here.
Thank you. And Councillor Prince. Again, I haven't seen Councillor Prince. The list of participants. I'll just come back. I'll continue. With the County Council, we've had apologies from Councillor Todd, and Councillor Porter is deputising.
Good evening, present.
Hello, and Councillor Warwick as well from the County Council.
Yes, good evening, and I'm here as well.
Lovely, thank you. And Councillor Iredale from Headbourne Worthy Parish. Thought I saw Councillor.
She was waiting to come in.
Sorry, what was that? She's waiting to come in?
She was waiting to come in a few minutes ago.
Oh, okay. Well, I've admitted everybody that was waiting, so I'll see what we can do on that one.
For her, Nancy. Yeah.
Councillor Iredale, I can see that you're in the meeting and the list of participants, so perhaps there might be a problem with the microphone or camera. Okay. Everybody apart from Councillors Godfrey and Councillor Prince.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Could you also read out, tell us which officers are present this evening, Nancy?
Yes, we have Julie Pinnock, who's the Service Built Environment lead. I've probably got the title wrong, I'm sorry, Julie. Chris Hughes, Medical Developments Team Leader. And I think I spotted also that Dawn Adey, Strategic Director, was also on the call.
Welcome, Dawn. Good to have you with us. Great. Okay. we have, well, a number of visitors with us. Will we take those when we get to that part of the meeting, those names, Nancy, of
Yes.
others who are present? Yeah.
I think so, unless I don't know whether it's useful to confirm who from Carla Holmes is here at the moment. I think I spotted Viv Hill and Ian Curry. Is that correct?
I think yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, great. And I've seen Nick and Alison from Hampshire and Isle of Wight, and Mike Slynn from the Residents Association. Great.
Thank you.
So first item this evening is to appoint a vice chairman. Do we have any nominations, or would anybody like to nominate themselves? If not, I will nominate Councillor Cromoyson.
You took the words out of my mouth.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for Councillor Cromoyson?
I second that.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations for vice chair? I'm not seeing any hands going up, so I think Councillor Cromoyson, you are duly appointed vice chair for the remainder of this municipal year, and thank you. And can I just say, record at this moment, our thanks to Councillor Rutter, who has been such a strong chair of the forum over the past 2.5 years, and I think we all appreciate the time and effort that she's been put into chairing this meeting very ably. So I'll move on now to apologies. Do we have any apologies, Nancy?
Only from Councillor Todd as the county councillor.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, item 3, disclosures of interest. Can I kick off? I will disclose my personal, but I do not believe it's certainly not pecuniary nor prejudicial. I'm a trustee of the University of Winchester Academy Trust, which runs the Barton Farm Academy. Are there any other declarations of interest?
Yes, yes, Chair. I'd like to declare a personal but non-prejudicial interest as a member of the Parish Council of Littleton and Hersnock.
Thank you, Councillor Cunningham. Councillor Iredale, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. As well as being the parish councillor for one of the parish councillors for Headburn-Worthy, I'm also secretary of the Kings Barton Residents Association.
Thank you very much. Okay. Any other interests at this stage? If not, we will move on to item 4, the minutes of the meeting of the 13th of July. Can I sign these minutes as a correct record?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Yes, agreed.
Agreed.
Very much. I'm sure we will come back to those during the course of this meeting. So I'll move on now to item 5, which is public participation. And I know we've got Mike Slynn from the Residents Association. Mike, do you have any issues you'd wish to raise, a statement you'd like to make at this stage, or questions to ask that we might pick up on during the course of the meeting?
Yes, Chair, thank you. A brief statement to let everybody know that we've had a successful meeting with Ian Curry and Viv Hill of Carla Holmes, running through some 14 immediate issues that the Residents Association have raised. And it may be that Ian or Viv want to comment on that, but we would just like to say that we're intending to hold similar meetings before each Kings Barton Forum in the future. The other thing I wanted to say was that we have 3 particular issues that concern the forum that we wanted to mention. The first is the traffic signals and associated speed limit on Andover Road. We have we're very grateful that the County Council has agreed to put in some traffic signals on Andover Road to enable a crossing between essentially Kings Barton and in particular the primary school and the secondary school in Hairstock and the rest of Hairstock on Week. So that's great. But we are concerned with the speed limit that is being proposed. The County Council has suggested or is proposing a 40-mile-per-hour limit. We would like to see a 30-mile-per-hour limit. We put in that objection now twice and haven't as yet had a response. That's one issue. The second issue is that of the speed limit on the main road through the development. That's Winchester Avenue. We understand that the road has been designed for 20 miles an hour, but the County Council wish to raise that for a speed limit of 30 miles an hour, and the Residents Association has asked that the speed limit be accepted as 20 miles an hour as satisfactory and consistent with the design. The third point really is about the road design itself. This has been going on quite a long time. We understand from Carla Holmes that shortly we all hope the County Council will be able to agree a design, and we're looking forward to seeing that design and, if at all possible, commenting on it. Thank you very much for that. My colleague Mel has one other further issue, maybe others as well, but one particular further issue that she would like to raise. So can I hand over to her, and then maybe County Council representatives can respond to the questions that we've raised. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I think those are very helpful points to raise. Councillor Iredale.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd just like to raise the issue of the path from the paving of the path from the Ridgeway, from Andover Road to the school, to Barton Farm Academy. We're still awaiting for that to be paved. We're now into the second school year of Barton Farm, halfway through the first term, and we still don't have a date as to when that path is going to be paved. It's really not suitable, particularly in this weather. It's in this current wet weather for parents, carers, young children to be doing the school run along that path. Also, I suppose for people wanting to avoid getting their feet muddy, there no doubt there's more cars, the more cars, school traffic, people going by car rather than having to walk along the muddy path rather. So hopefully once that's paved, more people might be inclined to use it. So that was one issue I wanted to raise. May I raise a couple of others, please? Please. Thank you. The play park in 1B, naturally that would be passed over to Headburnworthy Parish Council to maintain. We have a couple of concerns with regards to the current design, which a couple of design aspects that make it quite expensive to maintain. Obviously, we have to take into consideration the council tax that our local residents are having to pay. The first is the hedging, the hedge that goes around the play park is going to be expensive to maintain because we're going to have to cut it back quite regularly. This being that for play parks for this age of children need to be overlooked for safeguarding purposes. So we would always have to ensure that the hedge is fairly low. So what we propose is that the hedge is actually removed before we take on the maintenance. And the other maintenance issue that concerns us is that the gates, it's just a single gate to access the play park. So when it comes to grass cutting, we can't actually get a sit-on mower through. There's quite a lot of turf in the play park, so it's going to be quite a long job to do by a handheld mower. So we would like a double gate put in, and really on the basis of those two issues, if we could come to some resolution, then we would of course take it on.
Okay.
Sorry, sorry, I've got a couple of other things as well. I wondered if we're any further along with having a polling station on site.
Yeah,
because it's I've mentioned this when I was last at the forum. Unfortunately, I couldn't make the last one, but the previous one, in that residents, the nearest polling station is Jubilee Hall. It's really not very convenient for people that don't have that don't have their own vehicles. It's not very accessible on public transport. And sorry, just one more issue, if I may, with regards to the number of councillors. We already have a vacancy at the moment anyway, which we're looking to fill. But that's still with a growing population, as King Barton's is growing, we really do need more councillors within the parish council. You know, in order that we can represent our residents effectively. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Idle. Certainly some of those points were in the minutes from the last meeting, which, as you say, you didn't attend, and I imagined we'd come back to them. So thank you. Yes. This evening.
Thank you. Yes, yeah. I just wanted to
make sure that we.
But yes, yeah, make sure that it's still an open issue. So I thank you.
Well, perhaps we could pick some of these up with officers when we get to their reports further down the agenda. But I've made a note of those points, so we can.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks.
When we get to it. Okay. Thank you. I'm assuming that's our Kings Barton Residents Association. Chris, Julie, are you happy to wait until we get to update reports, or would you like to answer some of those points now?
I think for the benefit of our visitors who are going to give a presentation, Councillor, it might be better to answer those questions later on, if you're okay with that.
That's fine. Yes, we've all taken notes, so we'll be able to we won't forget them. Okay. Okay, Nancy, do we have any other members of the public who've registered to speak this evening?
No, we don't, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have any other visiting councillors who wish to speak? Councillor Warwick, I see your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Only I don't know if you wish Councillor Porter and myself to take forward. I know Mr. Slynn had written to Hampshire County Council with several issues that he brought up just now, and whether we have a new executive member who's Councillor Oppenheimer has taken over that sort of transport role at Hampshire. So if that's acceptable to you, Councillor Porter and I can chase up those points that Mike Slynn raised, if that's helpful at this stage.
I think it would be greatly appreciated. Yes.
Yeah. We've been copied in, so I've got a copy of his email, so that's fine.
Got the list of points. Really.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Appreciate that very much. Okay. Have I got Councillor Porter?
Yes, can I just briefly say to Councillor Idle, and I know that you've raised it too, that I have a meeting regarding the paths again with the education team as well as the school transport team at 1:45 tomorrow afternoon, and I will try and feed back as quickly as possible on that matter. But I'm very happy to work with Councillor Warwick on the other points.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, nice. That's Councillor Porter. Councillor Porter, could you lower your hand just so I know that we've dealt with your point? That would be useful. So if I have no further councillors wishing to speak at this stage, I'll move on to item 6, which is the update on Barton Meadows from the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust. Nick and Alison, are you sharing a presentation, or are you just going to speak to us, and would you like to put your camera on?
Yeah, sure. Good evening. It's Nick here. I don't actually. I'm not quite sure if Alison that I know of is part of the Wildlife Trust. I might be wrong.
I just assumed she was as she appeared and I didn't recognise them.
No, we've got one other member of the trust here, which is Bea Waleski, and she is the reserve officer for Barton Meadows. So she is with me, but at this stage she's just listening in to my presentation. She's recently taken over the role of reserve officer.
Fine, thank you very much. All right, please go ahead.
Excellent. Thank you. So I have put together a presentation. I will try and share my screen purely because I thought it's a bit more interactive than just looking and listening to me, which is no fun at all. Let me just see if I can, yeah, I should be able to share that. Can you see that?
Yes, we can. It just needs to be put on full screen mode.
Yeah, I'm just trying to work out why it won't let me do that, actually. Not quite sure. Let me try. There we go. Okay, so yeah, I've just been asked to give a brief update on Barton Meadows. It will take hopefully less than 10 minutes. And just to say, my name is Nick Reed-Beale. I'm the area manager for Hampshire and the Isle of Wildlife Trust. And essentially, I just wanted to give you a bit of a history of the site and a bit more detail on what the site is and what the future of the site is. So Hampshire Wildlife Trust have been working essentially for Carla Holmes for the last 4 years. Carla Holmes put as a part of the development of Kings Barton estate had to put some land aside for biodiversity net gain, and that was the area which is now Barton Meadows. It was previously an intensive arable area of farmland with high nitrates and phosphates put onto that area for fertilisation and to develop the crop that was grown there. What happened was that once we took over management of that land, we essentially turned that area into, it was reseeded and is now an active and managed a wildflower meadow. As you can see from these photos, it's going through a transitional period where when you reseed an area like this, it takes some time to settle. And we're finding different years that we have different species that are dominant, whether they be poppy or oxeye daisy, whatever it might be. But what I will say is now a thriving restoration project. It's very pretty. It's openly accessible. At least the pathway, the permissive pathway around it, is openly accessible to the public. It's very much classed as a countryside site, and we're getting very good feedback. What I would say at this stage, it's very important for wildlife, and it really is helping with ecosystem services. And by that I mean it's improving soils, it's improving water quality, because we have removed it from what was an intensive farming regime. It's now been going for about 4 years, and it really is a very pretty place to go. Certainly in late spring, early summer, when the flowers are up and the insects are on the wing, it's quite an impressive place. We get lots of good feedback from local residents, and essentially all we've heard is mostly good things. There's just an example of there's 2 compartments to the field. There's actually more than 2. There's 2 main compartments, and then we've got a small education and reptile set-aside area, and one other small area just up near the properties to the south. But as you can see, it's quite a nice looking place, and hopefully it's well appreciated by those who visit. So in terms of a functioning ecosystem, without doubt, we have quite a lot of survey activity on site. We've been surveying for invertebrates, for birds, and we've also had some soil surveys done. And what we're seeing is some really improving situations with the soils there. And obviously, we're quite close to the River Itchen, and any water that drains off Barton Meadows would essentially end up within either the water table or within the river itself. So it's quite an important situation there to try and keep the integrity of what is an important chalk stream. We obviously also manage Winnell Moors, which is just across the way, just over the road, slightly further to the east of Barton Meadows. So we've seen a significant increase in biodiversity, which obviously is an important thing. And the original net gain plan was to increase habitat for all species, but particularly for brown hare and skylark and farmland birds, all of which are on the increase. It is proving to be a successful restoration project. They sometimes don't take as well as it has. And we're seeing lots of wildlife returning that would have been absent, which is great. Particularly of interest are the invertebrates, the flying invertebrates, bees and butterflies and day-flying moths. We've seen some really exciting numbers of all, and particularly of bees, which we all know are struggling, which are really important for pollinisation locally for multiple reasons. The place is alive with buzzing insects in that late spring, early summertime. So if you haven't been, I highly advise you to go and have a little look and get as close to that meadow as you can and just sit quietly. It's quite a nice experience. And because of that increase in biodiversity, particularly in invertebrates, we've got an increase in birds and bats, basically, who are benefiting from that bounty. We also have deer on site. We have badgers. It's essentially a really thriving system. We've got owls nesting in some of the more some of the older trees where we've got tree holes. It's becoming a very important site. And one point which is of particular importance is bats. We conducted a month-long bat survey with different techniques, and what we discovered was that there were 12 of the 18 species of bat recorded. That was in 2019, which makes it locally very important as a habitat. There are very few places where you get that number of bats on one site over 1 month period, so it's actually quite impressive. Obviously, there's a rich food source there, which is why they're there. They're feeding, but also roosting in some of the older trees, and I dare say along the railway lines and in properties locally. It's an important corridor site between the river and the riparian habitats found down at Winnell Moors, which we know are important for bats as well. But also those bats will be feeding in other areas and transiting through. So it's just to say it's a rare opportunity for bats, which are also struggling. One thing that has been noted with interest by various people is the grazing regime we have there. What we tend to do is take a hay cut of those hay meadows in late summer, very late summer if possible, and we remove the offtake of material, which then takes out nutrients from the soil, which allow the flowers to dominate rather than the grasses. And after that cut is taken, we then graze that site. It's called aftermath grazing. We graze it with lambs and sheep, and also with cattle, which is why we have that extensive fencing system to fence off the meadows, because we don't want dogs mixing with livestock. That never goes very well. So that's quite clearly why we have that fencing in place. It's not for any other reason, but it is important that we do have that separation and those meadows are protected. And we have got one potentially new area for grazing, which is to the north of the properties on the south side of the reserve. That's still in discussion. We've got some other local issues to deal with first, but it is potential that we will be putting up a new small compartment which will be grazed probably with sheep. In terms of public access, which obviously is important for everybody here, the footpath system around the site is actually made up, the majority of the site is actually permissive footpaths. There's only one small area of public footpath which is legally open to the public. The rest of it is permissive. There is, of course, also the surfaced cycleway, which is a byway, which is between the new estate and essentially heading on in towards Winchester, and that was surfaced, I believe, last summer, if my memory is serving me right. It's becoming quite an important green space for recreational reasons. You know, whenever any of our staff are there, there's always people out walking, running, and just essentially enjoying the space. It is a countryside site. I would like to make that very clear. It's not a park, so we haven't got surface paths all the way around. It is muddy. It will be wet at times. There are no facilities on site, and I think that's quite an important thing to understand. It was never set up to be a park. It is a nature reserve stroke countryside site, and the core objectives are aimed at benefiting wildlife and people, of course. I will also say at this stage that the Wildlife Trust are actually not tenants. We are quite simply operating as land managers for Carla Homes. So at the moment we have no legal remit, and what I will say at this stage is any kind of legal issues that come up associated with the site, we are not yet currently legal tenants, so there's nothing we can do about those issues if they arise. The property is still owned and overseen by Carla Homes. We are essentially their land manager, and we invoice for the work we do on an annual basis at the moment. The plan, and others may wish to comment on this, but the plan at the moment, as I understand it, is that there will be a long-term lease given from Carla Homes to Winchester City Council, and the Wildlife Trust will become the tenants of the council and operate under a service level agreement. Just want to make that quite clear that we are not the legal owners or current tenants. So yeah, hopefully wildlife and people are benefiting. From as far as I can tell, that's very much the case. I think it's also just important to highlight, I do apologise for this slightly scribbleish map, but I had to do this in a bit of a hurry. So, you know, Hampshire Wildlife Trust are an important land manager within the Winchester area. All of these areas highlighted in red are areas that we manage or own. We've got in the north Barton Meadows, which is that sort of square block. I'm sure you will know where it is. We've also got then Winnell Moors just across the road. We've also got St Cross and St Face Meadows, which we manage south of Winnell Moors and St Face Meadows for WCC under a service level agreement already. We also manage St Catherine's Hill, Deacon Hill and the Dongus, which are all associated to the start of the downland, which spreads generally east from our location. And we also own a sizable farm and manage an area called Hockley Farm and Hockley Meadows, which is to the south of the city, indicated by that square just south near Compton Lock. So yeah, I just want to make it clear that we're very heavily invested in Winchester. We really enjoy being a part of the green infrastructure there. We work very hard to deliver, and particularly through COVID, we found multiple challenges with having so many people on our sites, but we were very heartened to understand how important our sites are to the public and of course to the city in general. So just to say, the future of the site is, as I've sort of briefly explained, that we would essentially manage it under a service level agreement, and it would, as I understand it, also stay as a nature reserve with providing access to the public to the countryside and of course protecting an important area for wildlife. So yeah, I apologise for that slightly flash in the pan briefing, but I thought that would suffice at this stage. Happy to take any questions if anybody has any. Let me just try and unshare my screen. There we go. I'm back, I think.
Nick, thank you so much for that. As a daily user of the Barton Farm, the area, I really appreciate what's been happening there, and I can testify that this summer the butterflies and moths were just extraordinary. I sort of couldn't stop commenting. The only time I'd ever experienced that amount was sort of in the sort of South America in alongside rivers down there. I'd never seen so much life as was present. So yeah, it's been a real achievement for those of us who live locally. Anyway, I wonder if we've got any questions. Councillor Porter.
Thank you, and I think this just reflects the parish council in Hebronworthy's comments really, that I do appreciate that it is for wildlife and that we're wanting to see people enjoy it, and they absolutely do. And the problem we have with one particular path, which is the one that runs effectively alongside the road, but within the site, which is at quite a steep angle, and lots of people have been concerned about people's ability to walk it safely. And I wondered if you've got any comment about the long-term management of the paths, accepting that they always will be muddy at certain times of the year, but it's about that safety aspect and about whether the width is right.
Sure. So actually we have been out and had a look at this, myself and Chris, and there is no quick and easy fix for that situation. They are hardened paths, but only to allow access for maintenance purposes and for walking. So the concept of trying to manage them as a more hardened or armoured surface is something we have thought about, but there is no simple solution to it, if I'm honest. And what I will say from my perspective, the Wildlife Trust is only remitted to manage the site for wildlife purposes and access, but we are not at this stage, as I say, legal tenants. So I think any question about infrastructure on site will have to go to Carla Holmes and WCC once that lease is then signed. But I think it is a tricky one, because I recognise that those paths can be potentially, as any path anywhere can be, more difficult to walk on than something which is a non-countryside site. But as a countryside site, I personally feel that they're adequate. They're not meant to be accessible to all. They were never meant to be surface paths which are accessible for anything other than the general public. So they're not hardened in a way that Winnell Moors South would be, which is for wheelchair access, for example, and users with disabilities. So I think there is a question there as to what is the future and what do WCC want it to be when they take on that lease. I think that is a question that needs answering. We would obviously then look to provide, we can certainly organise contractors to oversee the work. At this stage, that's not something we've dealt with.
That's really useful, because I think it's about the popularity has been enormous. Yeah. So I think probably more than we ever imagined, I think. So I think that is a really useful basis for a conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. Chris.
Chair, yeah, can I just reiterate that point that Nick made? We did visit the site, and there is a lot to do there if we are going to surface anything. But I can categorically say at the moment that Cala won't be spending the money to do it, so it does need to wait until it comes over to us. We could ask them again and put them under pressure in the meeting, but I suspect they'll say no. But when it comes over to us on the long-term lease, then as a council, if we take a position on something and we can fund that, then I'm sure Nick will facilitate that. But at the moment, it's a bit premature. So just to add, hopefully we'll have the lease sorted out in the next couple of months, I would imagine. And then we can start having those conversations in earnest.
I think, Chris, sorry, on that, I think, Chris, one of the things that you and I discussed, I think, which is pertinent to this in the long term, is having access to a fund. Whoever owns that fund is largely irrelevant, but access to a fund for that sort of capital work. And also, I've had complaints about other areas on that permissive footpath system, where others have also suggested it would be better if it was a different surface, but somewhat I disagree with that. However, if we were to service the whole pathway system, it's 3.2 kilometres. It would probably cost in the region of £100,000 to do so properly. So it is a question mark. It is a question mark. What does want to be achieved by servicing that path any differently to it is now? Yeah.
Thank you, Nick. And I do think that one of the things we need to keep an eye on, because I've witnessed it, is we have got a few off-road bikers
exactly
way around that. I don't know how, just keeping an eye on that and making sure that it's retained for the purpose that it's designed for. Thank you. Councillor Iredale.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we were talking about this at the last parish council meeting with cyclists using the paths, and we're looking to put some no cycling signs on the entrances to the paths. So I just wanted to mention that. Thanks.
Yeah, I've actually had a number of people, believe it or not, write to me saying, why can I not, these words, why can I not cycle on the footpaths? Well, it's because they're footpaths and they're permissive. The only cycle route is actually between the new estate and Winchester. So I think we need to be quite firm, all of us. And actually, we've had gates broken twice, which has cost the best part of £1,000. Because people just want access either for motorbikes or mountain bikes or, dare I say, vehicles. So yeah, I think it is important that we just keep an eye on that.
Thank you. Councillor Warwick. Councillor Warwick, you have your hand up?
Oh, I shouldn't do.
Oh, okay.
No, I don't think so.
Fine, it's all right. I'm being assisted here and...
Apologies, it was obviously an old hand, Councillor Warwick, it was my fault, sorry.
That's all right. Do we have any more questions? I can see a hand still up, but no, it's gone. That's it. Nick, thank you. I think we all really appreciated that. It's really put it into context. I think we've got a better understanding about the important aspects around the future leasehold and the trust's role in all of this. Please keep up the good work. From my perspective, it's a really wonderful asset to have on our doorstep. And thank you for coming along this evening.
No, thank you very much. We enjoy looking after it, and I dare say once we get to the final agreement, we'll be happy to do far more. It's just we're in transition phase. So listen, thank you very much for having us as well. And if we're not needed any further, am I okay to go? Is that okay? Yeah, lovely.
Thank you.
Lovely. All right. Listen, thank you very much.
Good evening.
Take care. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Right. So that's item 6. We'll move on now to item 7, the implementation update report. This, Chris.
Thank you, Chair. May I start with answering a few of the questions, and then I'll weave those in amongst my report as well, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
So first of all, questions from the Resident Association, Mike Slynn. Thank you, Councillor Warwick, for offering to chase up with Councillor Oppenheimer. I know there's been communication on the matters that were raised already to remind people the speed limit on Andover Road and when the traffic signals will be installed, speed limit on Winchester Avenue itself and how that's going to be managed, and the design of the Winchester Avenue itself. I don't think I'll add anything further at the moment. That's Hampshire's, it's within Hampshire's responsibilities, and we don't have a representative from Hampshire today. But I know that communication is ongoing. I appreciate your help with that, Councillor Warwick. Thank you.
Councillor Warwick, did you want to?
Yes, so slight apologies. I've had an email through actually this evening from Hampshire, just with an update on the crossing. So they've said that the design is now fully complete, and the crossing is, they've identified and approved funding. So work will be completed next year. What I don't have is a sort of month, but you know, as soon as I do have details of when next year, 2022, I will let you know. So thank you for that, Chair.
Thank you. That's reassuring for us all. It would be good to, well, as I think Mike identified, this whole question of the where we locate the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit is becoming increasingly important. Again, as somebody who crosses the road at about 8:30 practically every day, and I'm watching increasing numbers of families going both ways, and they tend to cross either down towards the Stony Lane junction or at the Desire line going into Horse Farm Close, neither of which are safe places. And with traffic moving quite often at well over 30 miles an hour, this is getting quite a scary place, to be honest. The crossing will help, but I'm not sure it will solve. We do need to get the traffic slower in that stretch, really from the entrance to Barton Farm Phase 1B, really going into town from there. So anything you can do on that would be greatly appreciated. Sorry, back to you, Chris.
Thank you, Chair. Secondly, Councillor Iredale's points. The path along from Andover Road towards the school and the extra element that we discussed moving in front of the school as well. I'm again grateful to Councillor Porter for her input on that, and I'm working from another angle with Hampshire Rights of Way team, the Countryside Services team. So hopefully we'll have a resolution to that fairly quickly, and we can get some works actually done before the worst of the weather comes in the near future. The second point that was raised, the play area and the maintenance. For the benefit of people that may not have visited, the approved drawings and the approved plan for the site required Cala to plant a hedge all the way around the, I think I'm correct in saying, the inside of the fence at the playground. As the long-term owners of that site, Headbourne Worthy Parish Council have asked for that to be removed. I think it's fair to say that we are slightly resistant to that as a council. Well, certainly my colleagues in landscape are, for fairly obvious reasons. I would imagine it's not great form to be removing a significant number of tree plants from an area that is trying to be as green as possible. However, if Headbourne Worthy want to remove them when they take ownership of that site, then they are obviously free to do so. I know Cala aren't keen on removing the hedge either. Yeah, it's a tricky situation, but I think it requires further dialogue with the parish council, which I'm happy to take forward. The second part about the gate, the double gate, again, I haven't got a resolution to that yet, but it's something we're aware of, and I'm in dialogue with Cala about how to resolve that. The third point was relating to the polling station. I'm afraid I did chase a little while ago my colleagues over in election services, but I didn't get an answer, so I'll chase them again, and with your consent, I'll forward round whatever the answer is to members before the next meeting, which I think is in January. And I'm not really in a position to comment on the number of parish councillors that Headbourne Worthy have, so I'll again speak to relevant officers within the council, and we can get an update on that for you. So to my report proper, unless there's anything specifically on those issues, I can see hands already.
I think Councillor Porter probably wants to comment on the number of parish councillors. Should we just let her deal with that one and then we'll come back?
Yep.
I was going to suggest actually that this is taken as an agenda item at the next meeting. Having looked at this problem for Whiteley and other communities, there's a very specific process that occurs, and I think it would be useful as a agenda item. It's really rather like the one we just had with the Hampshire Isle White Wildlife Trust. It puts a clear picture in everybody's mind of what we're aiming towards. So I would suggest it's actually an agenda item for the next time.
I'm happy to log that as an agenda item for the next meeting in January. Thank you. Okay, Chris, over to you and the report. Yeah.
Sorry, Chair. I think Councillor Horrell would like to speak or ask a question.
Thank you very much. Councillor Horrell.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, these are questions that relate to Chris's report, so maybe we should just let him cover his report, and then I can, if he doesn't address my questions, I can come back at the end if that's appropriate. Thank you.
That's fine. For those who can, if you could put it in the chat. I can see the chat. I can't always see who's putting their hands up, so it would be useful for those who can to use the chat. Over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Chair. It is a brief report. Just to, after the last meeting, where there was a lot of discussion about the various pieces of infrastructure that were still due to be put in, I thought members may wish to see that benches and bins have been put in. I know there are a few more that are still to go in, but we had a meeting with Cala, as Mike said, on site last week, and those were picked up. So hopefully the remaining elements of street furniture and bins will be going in soon. I think they're proving popular already from what I've heard from local residents, which is good. And we heard today that the bin collection, which has been a bit tardy, is now being sorted out. So people will now be emptying the bins on a regular basis. I think I covered, well, there's a post box been installed. I don't think it's open to be used yet. It seems to be taking an awful long time, but there is now a post box installed at phase 1B in the northern end, which is positive for residents. And as I noted, the discussions with Hampshire County Council are continuing. I may ask Ian Curry to come in and briefly give us an update on where exactly things are in terms of road agreements later on, if you're okay with that, Chair.
Yeah.
Phase 1A, over half of the dwellings there are occupied now. I know you felt it seemed like more than that, Chair, but it's rapidly going up now, and people have seen phase 2A coming out of the ground as well, to the north of what was the existing Barton farm site with the new house, the new housing there. We are still considering, as a planning authority, local centre applications. We have another meeting on Friday to talk about a few things, and I'm sure that'll come up then about the various states of those application. And also to mention that one of the things that was desired by both Cala and the forum was to have a bit more of a strategic working group. So the first step towards that happened in August when we met with Cala's MDs and Councillor Thompson, Lerney, Gordon Smith and Rutter, along with Richard Botham, to talk about the various issues at Barton Farm. Julie Pinnock and I have subsequently met Dawn as our new director for Place, who will be overseeing the planning side of things. We took her to site, and I think that's speaking for her. I think she quite enjoyed having seen the site, and we're very keen to get some kind of working group moving forward that will allow Cala and our strategic director to oversee things at an officer level, and then we can report things back to the forum. There was one other thing I wanted to mention, Councillor, if you don't mind. Many of you will know Nick Parker, who was the Principal Planning Officer for Winchester City Council and a team leader. He was the planning officer responsible for Barton Farm for many years. He's now left the council, and I just wanted to express my thanks to him for all the work he's done towards making Barton Farm the place it is.
Thank you very much, Chris. Okay, I have one question from Councillor Iredale. Could we which says Royal Mail can't give her a date as to when the post box will be in operation, but she is chasing that. That's right. Chris, could you just confirm where that post box is, just for the record, that we've got it, so we know where it is?
I may have to rely on Councillor Iredale's local knowledge. I tend to deal in plot numbers rather than road names.
Right.
So she may be able to tell us on the chat what the exact road is.
Sure. Okay, Councillor Iredale.
Hello, sorry, Mabel, my dog. It's on Wakeling Gardens, which is just off Winchester Avenue in 1B.
1B. Okay, thank you very much. It's just useful for the record to just know where it is. And it's good to be able to give an address rather than a plot.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Horrell has a question for you, Chris. Over to you, Caroline.
Thank you, Chair. Chris, I have several, if that's okay. If I may. The first question is about sort of transparency and visibility. I appreciate the residents' associations have met with Carla, but it's not visible to all of the rest of the forum what the content of that discussion and feedback is. Now, historically, obviously, those conversations have come to this meeting so that we can all be aware. My question is that information going to be made available to all councillors so that we can see what has been agreed and which issues are being resolved and tackled? My second question is, the 18th of January agenda item, you note in your report, Chris, that we're going to talk about the movement strategy. Will that include Sir John Moore, which obviously has an impact on the Barton Farm development? My third question is, you didn't mention about the fencing, which we had some dialogue between meetings, and it just might be helpful to clarify the comments that were made and your reassurance for the record at this meeting. The other question relates to the local centre. You just mentioned 5 applications are being considered, but surely if an application is in, they go through, the formal regulatory process of a planning application. It'd just be helpful to understand, what does that really mean is happening? Are they formal applications? Are they pre-apps? What status are these 5 applications for the local centre, and when will we be made aware of that as a forum? And then finally, I suppose my concern is about 11.18 in your report, where you report that this forum is now going to have another body, a project steering group, to help increase the momentum of delivery, but it doesn't tell us the governance, where that information is made available. Are forum members going to be party to that? Because obviously the forum's been a very open and helpful, very transparent organisation for everyone living on Barton Farm, trying to represent residents, the developers, everyone. It's been a very positive place to have conversations. And if there's now another group driving this development, I think it's important that we understand what it is, the representation of that, and how we're going to understand the impact of that group and what influence it brings to bear. Thank you, Chair. I know that's a long list, but all relates really to Chris's report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Horrell. Chris, I think it's reasonable for you to take some of these points, but I might ask Julie or even Dawn to take some of them around the strategic issues. But do you want to answer the ones that you feel are comfortably within your area?
Absolutely, yes. In terms of the first item about transparency and visibility of the conversations that we had with Calla, there is a note about those. It's not my note, so I will ask the Residents Association if they're okay with me sharing it, but it largely concerns things like the when the road surfacing is going to be done, when the bins that we're missing were going to be installed, how to deal with the play park gates and so on. So fairly local level issues that I am of course happy to share with the forum, but the forum didn't necessarily seem to be the best location to discuss the minutiae of some of that level of information. I think you're absolutely right. We should work out a way of sharing that. The intention is to have these meetings fairly regularly, probably prior to a forum. So it may be that I need to add an addendum just before the meeting so that members of the forum are actually aware of what we discussed, if that makes sense, if you're happy with that. I'm happy to do that, of course.
That sounds a perfect solution, Chris. Thank you.
Yes.
Just, if it's an appendix, that would be great, and then we could just understand the breadth. That would be great. Yeah. Thank you.
The movement strategy discussion, I think it would have to include the wider context of the site. The John Moore Barracks and how that integrates with the north of Winchester is something that occupies my mind, and particularly the interaction with the entrance into Kings Barton. So it's certainly something that I'm considering quite closely, and I'm sure I know other colleagues are as well. So yes, I'm sure that will become part of it, and I'll make sure that it is part of any presentation that's given. The fencing that you referred to, I presume that's the new fencing that went up along Andover Road. Yeah. So at phase 2A, those of you that know Andover Road will have seen, and indeed I had correspondence from Councillor Lerney on the same matter as well. So Cala installed site fencing along Andover Road to secure their site where they're building the new housing for phase 2A. There was a bit of concern from some members of the public that there was a bit of a land grab almost going on, but I think that what is going to actually happen at that point is it's not going to have houses backing onto it. It's going to be a public open space that people will be able to permeate into Kings Barton from Andover Road and that area of Andover Road. So it is a temporary fence. So given that, I thought it was a reasonable thing for Cala to install, and as long as they remove it correctly and the landscape elements that they're required to install are installed properly, I think given it's a temporary measure, it was an acceptable thing for them to have done. The local centre, I may, Chair, if you're okay, ask Viv Hill just to comment on how the local centre application process is working, if you're okay with that.
Yeah.
Thanks very much, Chris. I didn't think I'd get away from the meeting without saying something this evening. Just members will all be aware that many of the planning applications that were submitted back in 2019 now were submitted because there was a condition on the outline consent which required all reserved matters application to be submitted by September 2019, because that was 7 years from the expiry date of the original outline planning consent for the wider site. So those were submitted in isolation based on a number of stakeholder workshops that we'd held with members, Hampshire County Council, Winchester City Council and other third parties to sort of determine how some of those mixed uses were going to come together. Now obviously things have moved on. That was submitted and we started the work in early 2019 for that 2019 submission. Things have moved on. We're looking to tie up some end users who would be interested in taking on some of the mixed uses within the neighbourhood centre, such as the food store, local retail units, public house. Starting to have conversations with Winchester about who takes on the community centre, what might we do with the children's nursery, and how all those need to tie in. So in terms of evaluating our plan, we're in a position at the moment where we are at, I suppose, a pre-app stage. So I think Chris referenced the determination of those applications. In reality, they're the applications as submitted to date, and those were presented back at the forum probably 2 years ago. So those haven't changed, but I think it's worth saying that we are revisiting the neighbourhood centre as a whole to make sure it works, make sure it's permeable, make sure it's accessible, making sure we've got the right uses in the right places. So I think we are at a very, within the next couple of months, I think we'll be in a position where we could share those wider plans. We need to go through the due process with Winchester. We need to undertake probably a design review panel with the Winchester review panel. We need to engage further with stakeholders and officers alongside Chris and his team. So there is a piece of work which we'll be doing on the Neighbours Centre, but certainly from what I've seen to date and the work that our architects are doing, it is a far more improved plan. I think it'll be well supported and received once we're in a position to share that. But absolutely, we will be sharing it for comment before any determination of the new scheme for the whole. So I think it's a processing thing as much as anything. Hope that summarises where we are. Thank you.
Thank you. Very helpful.
Chris, before you go, can I just come back? So, as you say, you've got outstanding applications both on the neighbourhood centre and on all the phases, the remaining phases of the development. Will you be reviewing all the phases in due course? Obviously, the neighbourhood centre is becoming a priority for a number of reasons, so I can understand why you might, be moving that one forward. So it kind of comes out of the question around the fencing, because when that issue came up in August, just trying to explain to residents what was happening and track down a document that would enable us as councillors to give an informed response to resident inquiries was quite tricky. And I think it comes back to some of our requests to kind of have an overview of how things will move forward, that perhaps it's not locked into the applications that are there at the moment, but to be able to see that broad roadmap of where we're going, so that as you move from one to the next, we've got that picture and can engage. And I'll just lastly say, and I think I understand from Chris it was intended, but when something quite as radical as taking out the hedge and putting in a fence like that comes along, it would have been just some advance warning that it's coming along, because when we put the notices up along some of the paths, when you moved the hedge at the other side of 2A, that took out all the heat from that. People walking round, the hedge came out, but they'd read the notices, and it was much more relaxed. So I just want to encourage your team, just tell us when things are coming up, and if you can just get a few more notices up as it moves forward, I think it does a lot for relationships with the people living and using that site. Thank you.
I understood the point, and perhaps I'm missing something here, but presumably the fence that people are referring to is a sort of a Harris site fence to get that site security. I'm not aware of any hedges that would have needed to come out to put that fence up. You reference a hedge removal.
Oh, it was quite radical. I mean, they took out it was fairly untidy and not well kept along there, but it was greenery that sort of screened the Andover Road from the site, and when it started to come out, people just didn't understand what was going on. I think what's been put in is absolutely fit for purpose. I think it's quite interesting. We can see the site developing, where the roads are going, and it reinforces what Chris said about, there will be a public open space there.
Yes.
And if we just had a little briefing about that happening, it would have helped us a lot.
Okay, but answering your original question there, in terms of phasing, I'm sure, the forum is the place for us to present the revised phasing plans and our current, I suppose, our current thoughts on where we go next with the development. And by all means, absolutely, we will be reconsulting on every single residential phase as and when those come forward in due time. So yeah, absolutely, can confirm that 100%.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Thank
Caroline,
you.
There's one more point from Caroline's questions. I just wondered whether, Chris, you, Julie, or Dawn wanted to pick up on the question around the sort of high-level steering group on this.
Probably a combination of all of us, Chair, but if I may go first. Historically, my first week in Winchester City Council, I had a meeting with Steve Tilbury and Cala, and that was something that we had fairly regularly. And I think it fell away latterly while Steve was in the council, and I think it's something that CALA are quite keen to re-establish, just to talk about high-level things. The exact governance and how that's going to work, I might defer to Julie and Dawn if it's a bit harsh on Dawn to involve her in the meeting. She was only here to listen, I believe, but perhaps Julie would want to add something. Oh, there she is. I'll leave it to Dawn and her wise words.
Dawn.
Thank you. Gosh, I'm not sure I've got wise words, but I've got words. So I have been briefed by Chris. I'm looking forward to meeting our partners. I do understand we have some issues to discuss to help drive this forward at pace. So I'm looking forward to taking those on. I've heard very clearly this evening how important this forum is and wouldn't intend to work outside of the forum. So Julie may be able to help us if we've got formal governance put in place, but if not, I absolutely condone that we report through to this group.
Thank you, Dawn. Caroline, are you happy with that? 6 stands at the moment.
Chair, thank you. I mean, I think if we're going to understand the governance of that, and Dawn has clearly indicated that she is in support of that, sorry, excuse me, and that we'll receive the information as to what that is sort of dealing with, that would be really helpful. Thank you. Obviously it's only come up very recently and you're new to the role. So, but obviously if this is moving at a pace, we would like to understand that. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Dawn. Okay, I have a question from Councillor Porter.
Thank you, and I do apologise, Councillor Weir. I don't have, as a guest, I don't have access to chat, so I can't put anything on, so I'm sorry about that. I just wanted to ask Chris, have we had any prospect, or do we have any prospect of a path on site between 1A and the school? We now have children at the school and they have to go off the site along the Andover Road and back in, and I wondered if we are seeing any progress on that so that we can have something actually on site, because before 2A was started and the other work around there, they did have an informal route, and I wondered if there's a formal route. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is that we appreciate the progress is being made on the railway arch part of the plan, and that's expected to take place in early next year. How is the governance of the footpath that connects that onto the site being managed? So we're assured that it'll sort of happen at roughly the same time, but how is that being managed, that process? Because the footpath is a city council footpath, is in your remit, and the railway arch is in the county councils, although it's a 278 agreement.
It is, yeah. So to start with your second question first, the railway arch, for the benefit of everyone in the meeting, there are changes to be made to the Wellhouse Lane railway arch to allow pedestrians to effectively use it as a crossing between one side and the other, so to allow people to walk across from one side to the other safely without interference from traffic. That will then connect into the Kings Barton site on the Wellhouse, on the Kings Barton side of the railway bridge, and then onto a path that will then connect to the ridge line, which would then allow you to get all the way across the site towards Henry Burchford School. So the management of the Winchester path, as you termed it, on the Kings Barton site, that lies with me. So I've discussed again with Viv about the timings of that. They are very conscious that they don't want to put a path in that leads somewhere that isn't finished.
That's why I asked about the governance, because it's actually complicated. You don't want either exposing the public to danger.
Precisely. So there's going to have to be some clever management of that, whether we need to block it off physically with barriers or Harris fencing until it's fully open, or whether one gets put in. I mean, ideally we'd like them being done at a similar time so that once one is complete, the whole thing is open. So it may be that we have to put barriers up, but that's my responsibility to discuss with CALA about how we manage that.
Okay, thank you.
On your first point, the footpath from 1A, when 1A is proceeding at quite a rapid rate. So as part of that, the landscaping works, you'll have seen, I think you mentioned it, Councillor Weir, the amount of works that are going on beside the infiltration pond. So that will allow a connection from 1A up to the ridge line effectively. So when those works are in, there's not going to be that kind of direct route along the avenue until the avenue is put in. I've said publicly, I think we probably should have insisted on that early on, but for whatever reason we didn't as a city council, and now we don't have that connection. I know Cal are very keen to make sure that the two ends of the site are connected, and that's why they're pressing ahead with the local centre, but obviously that is some time away at the moment. So I can't give a specific time. I don't know whether Viv or Ian might be able to give an update on the progress of when they'll actually be able to get on-site access from 1A up to the 1B. They're not appearing on the screen though.
Shall I jump in very quickly? I think we did discuss this recently at a meeting, and effectively all the plots to the south of Winterbourne Meadows, that public open space that sits in the middle of 1A, once those plots are completed on that southern edge, but they're back onto Park Road, then we can allow that connection across to the new path that was created up to the ridgeline. I think those plots, from memory, and it is just from memory, are probably talking about a spring next year completion in that phase. There obviously will be a number of other building works going on to the north of phase 1A and then into 2A, so hence not allowing pedestrians to walk through a construction site. So it's just simply a case of completing the plots to the south of the open space, then that public route can be opened, which will then create a link between 1A and 1B, but also will create a link to Stony Green through the open space and then into the city centre as well. So it's only realistically it's only a few months away, if perhaps a little bit more than that, before the ability to have that through connection.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That's really exciting for me and the dog. So great news. And we can explain that to people as we go around. Thank you. I don't think I'm seeing any other questions at the moment, but if I've missed anybody, shout now or forever hold your peace. And we just, Chris, unless there's anything else you want to add on there. I was just looking.
So, Chair, you mind, there is a second supplemental report which relates to the section 106 triggers. So I don't intend to go through that specifically, but if there are any particular questions, then I'm happy to answer those.
Well, I was just, I don't know whether to coming back to on the minutes, and I see Councillor Cremoison's hand has gone up, but on the minutes, we did have a list of future agenda items. We've got the movement strategy one is coming up in January. Obviously, we've heard from Hampshire and Isle of Wight Trust today. We had archaeology. We haven't tackled today. I don't propose to take it, but we might want to just put that back on our list. I'm sure Councillor Cremoison will want to talk a bit more about phasing of time. We'll come on to the S106 tracker. We've talked about play areas. We haven't looked at cycle routes joining up, but personally, I think our priority is getting the walking routes joined up and those access. But I think if we could keep that cycle route joining up on our items to come back to, and we've talked about the new partnership. So I think we've covered. There's a few points on there that I'd like to see coming back to at a future meeting. But let's take Councillor Cremoison's question now before we go on to the S106 tracker. Thank you. Steve.
Am I there? Yeah, thank you, Chair. So really reassuring to hear that there's been quite a bit of progress and momentum on perhaps some of those smaller things that have been, of concern to the Residents Association, and good to see what appears to be a bit more momentum overall on the site. The thing I've been hearing over quite a considerable time is really the issue of managing expectations, and And I'm talking about expectations about how the overall site develops and when certain pieces of infrastructure will happen, whether it's this footpath or that cycleway, all those sorts of things. And I think the thing that is very hard for members, certainly this member, and residents as alike, is to understand when things are going to happen. And trigger points are, I understand that the trigger points are the sensible thing to have in terms of contractual obligations, but to manage expectations, we really need to sort of see sort of a timeline, even if it's just an indicative timeline, something to help us understand when certain things will happen and what order and that sort of thing. And that can facilitate discussion. Now, I think I've understood that the news, as part of the work going on with the new steering group, that a timeline will be forthcoming. And I just wanted to get that confirmed, that is, when I say timeline, an indicative timeline. I'm not going to, not a contractually binding one, because I understand that from Carla's point of view, you can't guarantee how many houses you're going to sell and get occupied by when, but there must be some idea here, and it would be really helpful for residents and members alike to kind of have that indicative timeline. So I'm not sure who to answer that question of. I imagine it's a joint venture involving Carla, especially. It can't be done without Carla, but then it might need to involve others, such as Hampshire County Council and Winchester City Council officers in, getting to that point of there being a timeline. Sorry, I've rambled on a bit. Hopefully that's clear.
Thanks, Steve. Chris, do you want to quickly respond to that?
Yes, I'm happy to answer that. I've been discussing the matter with Cala, and they are preparing the kind of information that you're looking for. It was their intention, I think it was at the meeting that we had with the leader, that it was agreed that would be presented at the first meeting with Dawn, and then as Dawn has said, that we will then report down to the rest of you members of the forum. There's no reason why that couldn't be presented before the forum, to be honest. As soon as we've had that meeting, I'd like to get that information out to you, so you can see it and understand better exactly what the timelines are. So yes, it's an action in progress.
That's great, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Chris, you were going to move on to the section 106 paper and the triggers. Was there anything you wanted to say there?
There wasn't. I'm trying to keep my microphone off as much as possible because my daughter is very unhappy about something upstairs. So unless there are any specific questions, I won't go through it in detail.
No. I think it's a much clearer paper now. I think I can think of ways of improving it further, but I'm not going to go into the minutiae of that here. But it's I think it's a step forward, certainly, in understanding what this is involving.
One thing I should mention, if you don't mind, Chair, is the deed of variation that's being discussed with Hampshire County Council to their section 106, because as members are aware, there are two section 106s for this development, one that Winchester are signatories to and one that Hampshire are signatories to. That hasn't been completed yet. A number of delays that, well, I'm not entirely sure why it's taking so long, but it seems to be taking quite a long time for Hampshire to get everything, get all the ducks in order. And again, I'll report on that as soon as I have news on it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Porter, I see your hand up.
Yes, I inquired about that. There's been some illness in the team, and they do apologise about that. So the person is now back and operating, but they're aware that that's an outstanding matter. We were trying to see if we can to achieve some other matters with that, just to clear up some of the potential opportunities from that S106, to make sure that it's clear for the future as well. So I think that's again something worthwhile to follow through, but I'm now receiving, as the local member, an update every 2 weeks about this to make sure that we try and keep the pressure up to get this S106 sorted and other matters.
Thank you. Thank you. Chris, I don't see, no, there is one hand still up. Okay, is there anybody? I'm just going to have a quick look at these hands, Chris, because I'm not quite sure if that was Councillor Porter whose hand is still up or somebody else. No, I think that was Councillor Porter's hand who's still up. So I don't have any more questions. Councillor Horrell has said she finds the tracker helpful as well. Thank you. That's really useful feedback. So we will probably come back to that on future occasions. But apart from that, I'm not seeing any more questions or debate. Is there any debate among members that they wish to raise at this time? Nope, I'm not seeing any activity. So I think I could. I'm sorry, I'm just watching something. Yes, we'll keep the tracker under regular review, Councillor Horrell. Thank you. I think that brings us to the end of the meeting. Thank you very much. And thank you for everybody who's attended. And I look forward to seeing you in January.
Thank you, Chair.